Hello. I'm reporting again from Ukraine, from this hellish conflict we are going through, war, and atrocities of war. I'm sure by now all of you heard already this terrible story of the town of Bucha and other towns close to Kiev that have been, and villages that have been recently liberated from Russians. So Russian troops were pushed away from that region into Belarus, basically, or closer to Russian-Belarusian border. And as our troops advanced into these towns, um, they were just shocked with what they saw inside. Um, those of you who never been to Ukraine, and I assume absolute majority of you have never been here, wouldn't know, but the towns around Kiev, around the capital, were like the best, the richest, the nicest towns in Ukraine, one of, and they were quarters, living quarters to many people. Tens of thousands of people lived there. They were very well taken care of, quite rich neighborhoods. And what we saw now, it was like complete devastation. And what is important to understand, this is not devastation of the war per se, like shooting, shelling, and then occasional hitting of a building or something like that. No, what happened there was a systematic killing of civilians, systematic rape, intentional killing of children on the street. We actually have footage of many children bodies, killing of whole families, and destruction, just absolute barbaric destruction of private property and of communal property, just out of envy, out of fun, for fun or for whatever reason they did it, but they simply would shoot from the tank into a newly restored hospital, destroy whatever they could, uh, loot houses and shops, businesses. Um, we have like hours of footage from Belarus of those Russian troops that entered into Belarus fleeing from that area. And first thing they did, they immediately went to a kind of FedEx office, a local postal operator, to send things they brought from Ukraine to their relatives in Russia. And the postal services in Belarus, for some reason, are equipped with real-time video footage that goes immediately to the internet, and for several hours before they actually switched it off, we could just see in real time these hundreds and hundreds of Russian soldiers coming to the postal office, bringing printers, scanners, computers, uh, clothes, fridges, TV sets, all kinds of, sometimes like carpets, like even not very valuable things they have looted from people's houses and from businesses, sending it to their families' homes in Russia. Well, this is a small price to pay. If it were only for those, that wouldn't be so terrible. But unfortunately, what happened amounts to a real genocide, to destruction of houses, massive destruction. In some towns, it's like 80% of houses are unfit for further restoration. Cannot be restored after this. Many people died. There are mass graves of people like this, with bodies just dumped into pits and into sand or something like that. And as I said, rapes, rapes, rapes. Sorry, just have to. So the good question is to ask who is to blame for this, because some people in the media or even under my videos keep asking who is to blame generally for this war, who is to blame for what's going on, and in this case who is to blame for Bucha. And Bucha obviously is just a signal word for what's happening. It's just one town. In every village we see the same pattern, uh, and we are terrified with the thought that this is only a tip of the iceberg, because these are just few villages and towns that were liberated by now, and there are hundreds of villages and tens of small towns that are so far under the complete control of Russian army in various parts of Ukraine, especially in the south and in the east. And we know already stories about people being taken from their homes in the night, disappearing into nowhere, and pro-Ukrainian activists being arrested and gone missing, many things like that. So who is to blame? Is it Putin's war? So is he one single responsible for this? Or are there any deeper roots to this phenomenon? And I would like to dedicate some attention to this, not because I want to artificially exaggerate the guilt of all Russians or anything like that, but I want to ask an honest question. Would this be possible if it were only for the politicians, as it's always, as it's almost often claimed by people in the media, that these are politicians' war? So there are bad politicians from both sides, or at least Putin is the bad guy here in this conflict. So he is the politician and his political elite. They entered Ukraine and they destroy people's lives. Yesterday we saw this absolutely outrageous manifestation in Germany, saying that we should stop Russophobia, we should stop blaming innocent Russians, like whole people, for what's going on. And of course, I admit that there is a very, very tiny percentage of Russians that do not share the guilt for this war, and those are the dissidents against the Putin's regime, people who were taking active stance against whatever criminal activities Russian elite was involved in over the past years. But in absolute majority, we clearly see the support of what's going on by Russian people. I took over the weekend, I took a kind of social experiment. There is this online service that is called Chat Roulette. It's a kind of random a site in which you switch on your webcam and then randomly connect with a peer from some country. You don't know the name of the person, you don't know anything about the person, but and you can talk for a minute or an hour, whatever you want, with this person. So I spent some time on this chat roulette, having made my selection for Russia, and just hitting into ordinary people who sit there in this chat looking for some kind of socialization. And I asked, like, what's your attitude to what's going on in Ukraine? And let me tell you, 80+% of people were absolutely pro Putin, were absolutely pro war, and at least 60% of those I talked to were aggressively, brutally offensive to Ukraine. Obviously, this is not objective sociological survey. I spoke to maybe 10 people, 15 for a couple of minutes each, but it matches actually the results of independent sociological service, that people in Russia support this. And it's not only about their passive support or even vocal support. They are actually involved in what's going on. Because if you look at the soldiers who shoot with tanks into residential areas, or simple soldiers who were just shooting with their machine guns at children playing on the street, or raping women, and sometimes underage women, really children. And I mean children like 10 years old. There are cases, many, like number of cases of reported rapes of this age, and teenagers and adult women, and sometimes old ladies. Who did it? It was not Putin. It was not members of Putinist elite. It was actually massive participation of the Russian army in these atrocities. And it was not just a random case that something happened, like there are always casualties, or how to say it, during the war, every time that something like that happens. The problem with the Russian army that this is not a bug, it's a feature, as IT people would put it. It's not a malfunction of the system, it's the system. That's what they do. Because to imagine atrocities and crimes, war crimes, criminal crimes of this scale being done by just tiny minority of the army, of some sadists that are, always people like that everywhere, who would act without the knowledge of the rest of the army or the command, is just impossible. Because the nature of the crimes is extremely public. Shooting people on the street or raping women in such quantities, in such numbers, it's impossible to do without explicit knowledge of the command or your peers. And that means that this behavior is socially acceptable in the Russian army and in the Russian society. Why it might sound to you as an overstatement, but another phenomenon we have been exposed to over these past weeks is the interception of telephone talks by Russian soldiers with their mothers and wives. Usually this mother or a wife they are calling. And since they are using usually stolen Ukrainian telephones, these are easily intercepted by our security services, and the most interesting examples of those are immediately published on the YouTube, and there are like hundreds of hours of those you can listen to, and I'm sure in the future sociologists, anthropologists will write a number of studies about those, because they are so telling of the mentality of the people. And this is so unbelievable if you listen to them, that human beings can speak in such a way, can behave in such a way, and can incentivize the behavior of each other in this criminal way. So, first of all, how they speak. Everyone who listened to those interceptions is deeply shocked with the amount of profanities in their language. Yeah, obviously all soldiers, sometimes just young people, swear, use obscenities and all that. But this is, again, it's not a bug, it's a feature. The way they speak is just obscenities on obscenities on obscenities. And I mean, not just like in the English-speaking world, the power of expression in obscenities is much lower than you can speak this so-called Russian mat. This obscene language that is extremely developed and is extremely brutal and sexually graphic. And when you hear a Russian soldier who is like 20 years old speaking like that to his mother, and the mother speaking the same way to the soldier, and the wife to the husband and husband to the wife, it's just so dirty, it's just so wrong. But that's one level. Then what they are speaking about is like a husband is telling the wife that he has taken some valuables from the apartments he just looted, And then she says, "Oh, could you look please for a laptop, because our daughter will be applying to the university next semester and she needs one. And then, can you bring shoes of certain size? Can you maybe do this and that?" So they are just like placing orders for what has to be brought to home from this looting. And when they say about killing of civilians, on the other hand, on the other end of the line, mothers, wives, they don't seem to care at all. They're just like being silent or laughing or saying some trivial words. And sometimes we hear like completely barbaric stories, like there are I think two cases when a Russian soldier says to his peer, it was a male voice in both cases, a father or a friend, that he is asking, "Are you not hungry there?" And the Russian soldier replies that, "No, no, we are not hungry. We have already slaughtered all the cattle here in the village. And actually today we ate an alabai, a dog. And it was so tasty." And the other time, another soldier reports having killed and eaten a dog. And actually, in the town of Bucha, one of the most shocking things, well, not most shocking because you can see so many dead bodies, but kind of unexplainable things that happened. They have shot so many dogs, cats, just domestic animals without any purpose. It was not like a dog that attacked soldiers or something like that. This was just a house dog who was on the chain or in a kind of cage. They killed them all. So this speaks about the lack of humanity. And this is something we will all still have to digest. These areas around Kyiv, they were always kind of heartland of Ukraine, and those were the areas that were most severely affected back in the Middle Ages by the Mongol Tartar invasion. Around Kyiv, Chernihiv, these were the areas where the Mongols raged and destroyed and burned down to the ground everything and slaughtered people and took captives and all that. So what's happening now is somehow archetypally perceived in Ukrainian society, almost like kind of strange replica, strange deja vu from the 13th century. And I grew up with the stories I heard from my grandparents or just old people in the village who were telling stories about Russian army, Soviet army coming to Western Ukraine in 1939 and then again in 1944 after the World War II. And they were always described as extreme barbarians. They would like chop out the trees because they wanted to cherries. They wouldn't climb the tree to pick up cherries. They would just cut down the tree and drag it with their tank and just like that, killing the cattle, purposelessly destroying people's properties. And whenever I heard these stories, they would always be described as Mongols or as Tartars or as this kind of controllable Asian horde that flooded Ukraine and destroyed people's lives. And I, being a young boy, I would always think like, oh, this is an exaggeration. Obviously, Russians are not the horde. They are not medieval barbarians. Savages. They are civilized people. We are studying Russian literature. We are watching Russian TV, Russian ballet, all that. But it seems like in today's Ukraine, we are actually experiencing this is true. Our elders were absolutely correct in their characterization of Russians as extremely barbaric and savage force. And I will place a text under my video. It's too long to read it here, but for those of you who want to read, it's a kind of viral text in the Ukrainian social media. speaking about great Russian culture in the light of what we have seen over this several weeks in Ukraine, and it really calls for re-examination of our attitude towards Russian soft power, because it's not about culture. I don't want to slander someone's culture or undermine someone's human dignity. It's about the fact that this great Russian culture was used and is used as a soft power to subordinate other peoples, for colonial expansion, for aggressive purposes. And what we are seeing is not only complete fiasco of that propaganda of culture, it's actually masks off moment. It's actually, we are seeing what this great culture amounts to when faced in real life. Please watch this video, spread it, and thank you for your support we are feeling here in Ukraine.